Have you ever stopped to think about what the most important words a person can say are? Today, we're going to dive into a pretty powerful sermon by Pastor Luciano Barreto that starts with that exact question. And his answer? Well, it might not be what you expect. He has this idea that our final words are what really show our true priorities, and that's the key to his whole message on the power of the Holy Spirit.
So let's just start there. What are the most important words you can say? Is it I love you? I forgive you? Maybe I'm sorry? Well, according to Pastor Barreto, it's actually none of those. He argues that the real measure of what matters to us isn't in our everyday chats, but in what we choose to say at the very end.
And he's got a couple of great ways to illustrate this. I mean, think about the Oscars, right? They save the biggest, most important award, Best Picture, for the grand finale. Or, get a little more serious, think about the last words of someone you love. They aren't talking about taking out the trash. They're talking about what's truly on their heart: love, forgiveness, maybe a final wish. The takeaway is pretty simple. We save the most important stuff for last.
And that brings us to the real core of this sermon. Pastor Barreto takes this exact same principle and applies it to Jesus' final moments on earth. He points out that the very last thing Jesus told his disciples, it wasn't another lesson on love or forgiveness. It was a command to receive power. And that one instruction, that one final word, sets the stage for everything else.
Okay, so this whole idea leads us right into the first big problem the pastor talks about, what he calls the impossible task.
The command from the book of Acts is super specific. Jesus basically says, don't go anywhere, don't start trying to change the world, you need to wait. Seriously, just wait in Jerusalem until you receive power from the Holy Spirit. The message here is huge. Trying to do this on your own, with your own strength, it's just not going to cut it.
And that leads to this really bold claim in the sermon. The pastor says that so many people today are trying to live out their faith without this power. And in his words, that's not just a difficult thing to do, it is completely 100% impossible.
So you've got these two ways of living, right? On one side, you have a life without power. It's just maintenance mode. You know the feeling, just getting by, kind of blending in, maybe even getting swallowed by the culture. But on the other side, that's a life with power. That's a life that carries a message, that has an impact. It's where, as the pastor says, heaven starts here on earth.
So, if this power is so important, where do we actually need it? I mean, where does it show up in the real world? This is where the sermon pivots from the big idea to the nitty-gritty of everyday life.
He points to three specific areas where he believes this power isn't just helpful, it's absolutely crucial. In our marriages, in raising our kids, and in our work, whether that's in business or some other ministry.
Okay, first up, marriage. We tend to think that if you have enough love and enough money, you're all set, right? But the sermon says, nope. There are going to be times in every single marriage where those things just aren't enough, and you need something more, a higher power to hold things together and keep it from falling apart.
Then we get to parenting, and the pastor uses this really cool image, a spiritual radar. He says that without it, parents are kind of flying blind. You can't see the invisible dangers, the hidden anxieties, all the online pressures our kids are dealing with. This power, he says, is like having a radar that lets you see what's really going on.
And what about in the professional world? Well, he tells this incredible story about a businesswoman. After hearing this teaching, she started praying with her board of directors. During one of those prayer times, she says she got this clear insight from the Holy Spirit that one of her directors was stealing from the company. And get this, it was the one guy who would literally tremble every time they prayed.
Okay, so if this power is real and we need it, what does it actually look like? How does it show up in our lives? The sermon gives us a framework here with three specific situations.
It's pretty straightforward. He says that this power tends to show up in moments of real, deep necessity, in times of direct spiritual confrontation, and right in the middle of whatever your unique calling is in life. So first up is necessity. This is when you're at the end of your rope. You've tried everything, there are no human solutions left, and you're just stuck. He shares this deeply personal story about his sister, who had a dangerously high fever. In a moment of total desperation, he just prayed for a miracle. And he claims that's exactly what happened. Within minutes, her fever broke, just like that. Gone.
Second, there's confrontation. The sermon describes this as a kind of clash between light and darkness, where just a word or an action has this huge supernatural result. He tells this wild story of a law student who felt this compulsion to tell a hostile newsstand owner, "Your business won't be here in a week." A few days later, a massive flood tears through the street, and the only thing it destroys is that one specific newsstand.
And finally, your calling. This is all about being supernaturally equipped for whatever it is you are put on this earth to do. Pastor Barreto talks about his own calling to work with young people. He says that when he stepped into that, he was given this gift, not of literally reading minds, but this deep, intuitive ability to know what young people were really struggling with, the stuff they would never say out loud.
Now, this sermon isn't just about theory. It doesn't just diagnose a problem and describe a power. It actually wraps up with a very clear, practical what-to-do-next guide for anyone who wants to experience this.
He calls them 3 corrections. First, change your motivation. You can't seek this power for your own ego, to look good, or to get ahead. It has to be about serving other people. Second, correct your daily search. Focus on your private, internal spiritual life, not just the public one everyone sees. And third, and this one's a big one, correct your definition of normal. You have to be willing to do things that might seem a little, well, crazy to other people.
And to show what that crazy might look like, he tells one last story. He's on an airplane, and he gets this feeling, this nudge, that he's supposed to talk to the woman next to him, a complete stranger, and ask about her father. It turns out her dad had recently passed away in a really tragic accident. And that one seemingly random, unconventional conversation opened the door for this profound moment of healing for her, right there at 30,000 feet. All of this builds to the sermon's final, incredibly challenging conclusion. It's really about what's at stake. And he puts it this way: you empty means a much worse world, and you full means a world greatly transformed.
And that's where we'll leave it. The sermon leaves us all with this huge question, and it really goes beyond any specific faith or belief system. What does it actually mean to live a life that's more than just maintenance mode? It's a question worth thinking about, and we hope this breakdown has given you a lot to chew on.